meeting. I understand that the roll is automatically, electronically recorded, so you do not have to check in, correct, Terry? Okay. First order of business, I'd like to call Chairwoman Scott. She would like to say a few comments.
Good morning, everyone. This being our first meeting as a board since the passing of our CEO and general manager, I'd like to call for a moment of silence. Thank you. Back into your hands, Chair Pond.
Thank you, Chairwoman Scott. First item on the agenda is the approval of the prior minutes. We would need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
Is there something we need to do?
Okay, we move here. Press.
Have we gotten it yet? Okay, we have a first and a second, a motion and a second. I'd like to call the question.
Go ahead and vote. See you vote on the right.
On the right?
On the left. See at the top where it says 4.
I'm still not sure. Oh, there we go. All right, the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a briefing for the up-and-coming A&E consultant procurement contract for design services for the Clayton County Operations and Maintenance Facility. That'll be led by Larry Prescott. Larry?
Good morning, Chairman Pond, distinguished board members, Mr. Greenwood. Today I'd like to provide you with a brief briefing for the upcoming architectural and engineering consultant procurement for the design services of the Clayton County Multi-Purpose Operations and Maintenance Facility. Next slide. So as part of the MARTA program for Clayton County, we intend to build the operation and maintenance facility for the bus expanded services down in Clayton County, as well as the security with the new police precinct. This meets the 15th Amendment commitment that we've made to Clayton County, as well as gets a better capacity and allows the Hamilton bus facility operations to move south there as well. We are currently in 30% design, as well as completing the right-of-way acquisitions for the parcels. Our real estate group is working on the 2 parcels. The smaller one is in process right now, and the larger one is in condemnation proceedings. Next slide. So we want to solicit for a single architectural and engineering firm to provide us with the final design for this full facility program. The facility will be located in the southeast corner of town, below 285 and 75, just below the farmers market down there. This site will have the capacity for 250 buses, full operations, and the police precinct. Next slide. Cost-wise, we're estimated around $10 million for this service. For the overall program, construction cost of $150 million, including the real estate based on our current 30% design. Schedule-wise, as I stated, we're in real estate acquisition right now, as well as 30% design, and we also have ongoing environmental planning services that will overlap with the 30% design into the final design, which we intend to start this June. And I'll be back at that time for approval of this selection. Next slide. I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. This is a briefing, not a board action, but are there any questions for Mr. Prescott?
Mr. Chair, would you explain to me what 30% design means and what that, who's doing that?
Our on-call planning service consultant, AECOM, is doing a 30% design. They have done the public outreach, the site selection, the site modifications, as well as the stakeholder internal and external coordination as far as what the services will be and the size of them. So space planning included, some preliminary environmental work, and in coordination with the stakeholders locally and internally.
Larry, I'm thinking we discussed this in the pre-brief, but in the 30% design, they'll also be selecting the systems, and there'll be more than just the footprint of the building, but also all of the systems and the site plan and all of that is
Correct.
headed over.
We'll have the full service of the entire program. So we'll have fare collection, bus cleaning, we'll have the bus services, the fueling, and the full operations, heavy and light maintenance capacity within the buildings themselves. The police precinct will be the full support precinct along with a firing range down there. So
And
it'll
all
be
of the-
internal.
All the requirements for the HVAC systems, the ventilation systems.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Prescott? Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a briefing for research and analysis ridership by Rob Goodson. Rob? Goodwin, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Chairman Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Anu, members of the MARTA board. Good morning. My name again is Rob Goodwin. I'm the AGM of Research and Analysis, and our mission is to turn data into information to help MARTA make better decisions. The purpose of my briefing today is to give you a preview of the monthly ridership report that's developed by Research and Analysis. And there's two main drivers behind the development of this report. One is to better understand how our customers use our service so that we can use this information to optimize and enhance our service, both to retain the customers we have, but also attract new customers. So a really great example of this is the current bus network redesign project. That started with very detailed bus ridership information. So we know how people are currently using our service, so we can take that information to try to optimize it and come up with different scenarios for that. So that's just one example of how you can use this information. The second driving factor is transparency. We get a lot of inquiries about our ridership numbers, and it's really become even more so since the start of the pandemic. So our plan is to make this report available to the public on a monthly basis. After we have to set up a few loose ends, I'll tell you about that in a moment. But then the goal to that is to help build trust and credibility with our external stakeholders. One thing also I'd like you to keep in mind as we go through this is this is the first iteration of this report. I mean, we fully expect it to evolve over time as we learn how to make it more actionable and better respond to our stakeholders' needs. Next slide, please. So again, the purpose of the report is to provide timely, accurate ridership information to help MARTA make better, more strategic business decisions. To that point, we track monthly ridership on all 4 of our operating modes, and we also provide analysis of any sort of trends and root causes along with it. The report is structured such that it starts at a very high aggregate level, so like monthly, system-wide total ridership, and then progressively drills down into more detail as you get into the report. So for example, it starts at monthly level, daily, then down to time of day, and down to hourly dating. The report is built in Microsoft Power BI, which is software that's specifically designed for visualizing and analyzing data. But the plan is to publish it to the web, so the reader's not going to need any special software. They'll just view it in a standard web browser. But the really cool thing about Power BI is that it enables the reader to interact with the data, to slice and dice it by simply pointing and clicking on charts and tables and filters. But for this presentation, I'll be showing you screenshots, basically, of the report. Just keep in mind that the online version is going to be very dynamic. Next slide, please. So this is the table of contents, just so you get an idea what it currently contains, and you can kind of see this progression from high level into more detail. For purposes of this presentation today, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all these. I'm just going to walk you through a handful of them, so you can get a sense for the look and feel of the report and how it can be used as a tool to better understand how our customers are using our service. Next slide, please. So, by the way, the stuff I'm going to go through is all really specific to December 2021 data. And you'll notice here, online, when someone is working with this report, they can select what month they want to look at. So we're going to be talking about December 2021. So the executive summary gives the 3 or more key takeaways for the month of interest. So for December 2021, the 3 key takeaways are that ridership grew by 30% over calendar year 2021, but it still ended the year about half what it was prior to the pandemic. And what we see in the data is that the pandemic impacted ridership across the board. All 4 modes, all areas, all parts of the service area, all days of the week, all times, you name it, everything got hit hard. But we find in the data, there's indications there's some trips or some areas that got hit a little bit harder. Specifically, what you can see in the data is that rail was hit a little bit harder, and that weekday peak period trip, northern end of our service area into our employment centers like Midtown, Downtown, Buckhead got hit disproportionately hard. So we're going to drill into some detail and show you how this report reveals that information. Next slide, please. So this slide starts at that 40,000 foot level, very aggregate. It's monthly total ridership going back to January 2019. And then the chart on the right in orange is the monthly rail ridership. In blue is bus ridership, and then way down, you can't really see it's mobility and streetcar ridership. But what you can clearly see from this is, first you can see the onset of the pandemic in March 2020 with that drop off. But you can also see that, indeed, rail ridership was impacted more than bus ridership. The orange line, which started out higher than bus before the pandemic, since the pandemic, has more or less been lower. The past few months it's caught up, so they're about equal. Next slide, please. So now we're going to click down one level of detail. We were at the monthly system total. Now we're at system daily averages. So what you see in the table on the right here is for December 2021. It's the average weekday boardings, and in this case, it's for all modes combined. Weekday boardings, Saturday boardings, and Sunday boardings. That's on the left part of the table. Then to the right, there's the month-over-month percent change, so November to December 2021. Year-over-year percent change, so December 2020, December 2021, and then the change compared to before the pandemic. So it's looking at December 2019 to December 2021. And what kind of the key takeaway here, if you look at the column on the far right, so comparing December 2021 ridership to pre-pandemic, you can see that weekday ridership was hit a little bit harder. It's down 50% compared to weekend ridership was down about 40%. Next slide, please. All right, clicking down again. So now we're going from daily to hourly ridership. And the chart in the bottom right shows the rail ridership, weekday average rail ridership for December 2021 by hour in blue. So that was December 2021. The gold line is November 2021, previous month. The green is last year in December. And red is prior to the pandemic. So you can obviously see the impact. And what you can also see is that those peaks were much reduced, right? If you go to the table at the top, it summarizes that information in tabular form. The same current month, month-over-month, year-over-year, compared to pre-pandemic. So the takeaway here, if you look at that right-hand column, comparing December 2021 to before the pandemic, you can see that the AM peak period and the PM peak period were hit a little bit harder than the midday and off-peak period in rail ridership, right? It was down 60% or more compared to in the 50s. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to click down instead of by time, now we're by location. So the map on the right is clearly our rail systems, all 38 stations in our rail system. And currently in this slide, they're color-coded by the average weekday entries. And so dark blue is more entries, more activity. Light blue to white is less. And then on the left, The table, again, summarizes that information, but it summarizes it by rail line. So it aggregates stations together. And again, current month, month over month, year over year, compared to pre-pandemic. Takeaway here, again, if you look at that pre-pandemic change column in the table, you can see that the north line, which is the red line north of Lindbergh, the northeast line, which is the gold line north of Lindbergh, and the trunk line, which is those stations between Lindbergh and Peachtree Center inclusive, all were hit a little bit harder than the rest of the lines in terms of rail ridership impact from the pandemic. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the final one. There's more in this report, but this is the final one I'm going to talk about. So what this slide shows is the top 10 station to station pairs in our system for December weekday average for December 2021. So these are the most popular trips people are making on our service, right, from this station A to station B and back. So the takeaway from this is if you go back and look at December 2019, you'll see that 7 of the 10 of these pairs were also in the top 10 prior to the pandemic. But the 3 that dropped out, one was Lindbergh to Peachtree Center, so Buckhead to downtown, which is just out of the top 10 now. One was Doraville to Peachtree Center, so the northeast line, right, gold line to downtown, which is now like 18th. And North Springs to Peachtree Center, so red line north to downtown. And that's currently 43rd. So again, when you put all this stuff together, you see the rail was hit harder during the weekdays, during the peak periods, and from the north part of our service area into the employment centers, right? So the indication there is, and this deserves a deeper dive, that those customers probably had an option to telework and are using that option, right? I mean, we don't know for sure. We actually did some surveying during that time, online surveying, and we got some interesting results. About half the people that responded indeed said they were working from home as a reason why they were riding less. Now the question is, what's going to happen? Like, if they return to the office, if they have, why aren't they taking MARTA? What can we do to get them back? If they're not returning to the office, can we do something to get them back? So these are all the questions that you can start to address, but you have to know first what the issues are, and this tool helps you identify those issues. Next slide, please. All right. So just to wrap up, again, the driving forces behind this is a tool to understand how customers use our service and transparency of our ridership to build trust and credibility. The plan is that, well, first, before we publish this, we're going through a process of validating our bus ridership data. This report is fed by data from our automatic passenger counter system on our buses. All our buses have sensors on them counting people getting on and off. So we're going through a process of manually checking those numbers to ensure their accuracy. Once we're confident in that, we'll go ahead and publish this to itsmarta.com. That process I anticipate is going to take a few months, so I'm thinking April, May timeframe to actually publish this. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, Rob. Are there any questions for Mr. Goodwin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one, too.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you. This is a great report. Once again, it really is. It really tells us where we're at with ridership in all the locations. Have we had this data before, but it just was in a different way of us looking at it? I mean, I think I've seen the report maybe once before since I've been on the board,
Yeah.
but it wasn't done in this manner. So I was just wondering, was it?
Yeah. So it's a matter of organizing it
Right.
and getting access to it in a way that we can pull it efficiently and effectively. So the data have been there. One example, for example, the table on the popular trip pairs on rail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have to analyze data on where people tap in and where they tap out for that trip.
Yeah.
The data's there, but we haven't had really direct access to the data, which we recently got. About a year ago, we got access to. We can actually pull the data ourselves directly from the database. That's facilitated the ability to now start analyzing it in a deeper way, in a more meaningful way, and actually presenting it and reporting in a more meaningful way. So data have been there. It's a matter of organizing it in a way that we can use it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mayor Floyd?
Yeah, this question's probably going to show a little of my ignorance about what you're doing here, but this data is interesting, and I think it tells us a lot about what's gone on.
Right.
And where the situation is today. But how do we integrate the data that we don't have into the decisions that come as a result of this? And I guess I'm really not looking for an answer to a question that I'm not understanding myself, but it seems to me there's a lot of information out there from a standpoint of what happens if we do this, what happens if we do that there might be some way that ought to be part of the decision-making process that this information provides to us to make. I mean, and it could be something as simple as, what if we move this bus line 2 blocks over? What if we add another bus to this? How does that change stuff, and does any of that make sense to
Yeah,
you
no,
at all?
absolutely. And I'll go back to my example at the beginning, the bus network redesign. It's not taking data from this report specifically, but the data that feed this report, we provided to the consultants, and they started with that to try to say, okay, how can we optimize this network to serve, we know how people are currently using it, we want to keep them. We also want to try to access some of these other areas where there's opportunities potentially to also use it. So, to me, if you don't, it's hard to figure out where you're going if you don't know where you've been, really. And so this is, yes, you're right, this helps tell us where we've been, and then the challenge is, how do we use that? It's what you're saying. How do we use that then to chart the course forward, right? I guess I didn't really answer that, but there's definitely, that's an example of how you can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Greenwood would like to add to that.
Sure, yeah,
Please.
thank you, Rob. I just wanted to, first of all, thank Dr. Goodwin for all the work he's done on this. This information has allowed folks at MARTA to go from what some of us felt was the case and was indeed more of a hunch to a data-driven, objective, and transparent set of values that we can now share with the customers, increase their knowledge about the product that we're providing them, and also help us to make better business decisions. And Rob and I had talked some time ago about the value of this tool in terms of next steps and predictive management, predictive data management and analytics. So he talked about further mining in terms of some of those pairs that were, that were no longer in the top 10. And so we started to look at, and Rob gave some excellent examples about why did those station pairs drop down. But it also helps folks like our operations teams figure out where indeed the busiest stations are, where the changes where do we need to go in and do targeted cleaning, because these are indeed the busier stations. It gives us a sense of further action planning, and asking those further questions will give us, in fact, more direction in terms of where we want to go as an organization. So, but it really starts with understanding where we've been and having it all collected in one digestible format so that we can go further with it.
Connie, I might, and Rob, ask this question. It seems to me that when we make decisions, if you're planning the Northern Arc transit line, and we're trying to make decisions about where stations go, what affects how people, who gets on at a particular station, that there must be something in here that can help us as we begin to look at that and make decisions about that. And I guess that's what I'm getting at, really. North 400 and the I-20 line, those kind of things, about where are the key points that we begin to look at it as we look for ways. We're talking about increasing ridership. Well, and I will say that I've long said that MARTA's biggest problem is it doesn't go where people want it to go. And that's one of the things I think that impacts our ridership. And there may be some information in here for somebody a lot smarter than me to figure out what it means.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think first putting it on the platform and then being able to use it is key to that.
The only thing I might add is, in my mind, the key things that we want to know is who's using our service, how they're using it, and why. Right? Those are the things that are key to being able to figure out our market, our future. This is really mostly about how they use it, but in figuring out who and why, that's when we go out into the system and we're interviewing people and getting that information from them about, characteristics of our riders and the why they're using, like where they're going to work, and et cetera. So I think it's a combination of those three things that we really need to make the best decisions going forward.
And Mayor Floyd, I'll add as well, for the expansion program, we do travel demand modeling, working with the Atlanta Regional Commission as well as the FTA stops model. And all these data help inform what we see as the travel demand market and how best to serve that with the alignment, with the mode and the location of stations, and also whether an initial idea to explore a transit corridor actually would be cost effective.
Thanks, Manjeet. Any other questions for Rob? All right, are there any other matters to come before this committee? If not, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Meeting to order. I'm not logged in up here, but I'm going to watch it on the screen up top, and we're just going to do the best we can. I think that the system signed everybody in. And the next first thing on the agenda is approval of the November 18th, 2021 Operations and Safety Committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for approval? Okay, it was moved by Mr. Snyder, seconded by Ms. Hartage. Does that seem right? Okay. And everybody has voted, correct? Okay. Sorry, I'm flying blind. Okay. The minutes have been approved. We will move to agenda item number 2, resolution authorizing the award of contract IFB 49479 for authority-wide landscaping services. And that is Mr. Thomas. Can I have that?
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair, Ms. Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and esteemed Operations and Safety Committee members. My name is Sean Thomas, Director of Facilities, and if I may, I'd like to bring your attention to agenda item number 2, and this is a resolution authorizing the award of contract IFB 49479, and this is for authority-wide landscaping services. Next slide, please. This resolution supports the strategic objectives of the authority to ensure that we foster safety and morale for employees and patrons, as well as promote MARTA's image and brand. Next slide. As an overview of the discussion, I'm going to provide a breakdown of the sites included in this solicitation, a description of the services provided, a bid timeline, to the award analysis, to be followed by the recommendation. Next slide. So as an overview, this solicitation covers a vast amount of property and is segmented here, as you can see, into zones and service areas, and is structured to utilize multiple vendors. And we took a different approach with this solicitation, and it provides us the opportunity to utilize a larger number of smaller firms to help us with meeting those objectives. Next slide. So as far as the services, we split them into 2 categories. We have the standard services, which include scheduled mowing, edging, trimming, delittering, and we also have what we consider to be supplemental services provided by a different group of vendors. And those supplemental services could include immediate site improvements, unscheduled services, and additional seasonal plantings of shrubs and flowers, et cetera. Next slide. So with regards to the bid timeline, we received 8 bids prior to the bid deadline, and we're seeking to award to 5 vendors. And this solicitation was initiated in October, and we went through the pre-bid and site visits, and here we are today with this request for authorization to award. Next slide. With regards to the award analysis, this contract is broken out into 2 base year terms and 3 option years. The DBE goal was established at 28%. However, it's also worth considering that 3 of the 5 vendors that we're seeking to award to are certified DBEs. And the funding is broken out. The funding and awards, rather, are broken out, as you see here. So the primary vendors, the combined total of the award would be $2,840,425. The supplemental award will be broken among the 3 vendors, and that portion of the award amount $2,718,000. And cumulatively combined, we're looking at $5,558,000 for the total contract award among these 5 vendors. Next slide. So in closing, we've discussed the objective of the solicitation and the key points that justify the necessity of this program. With this in mind, I respectfully request authorization to award multiple contracts for IFB 49479 with a combined total of $5,558,000 to the following vendors: Worldscapes LLC, Lawn Creations, Flex Landscaping Services, Stone Mountain Turf and Shrubs, and Grand Landscapes. Thank you for your time and consideration. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Do I hear a motion in support of the resolution?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, and it's, okay, so Frida, will you click move?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then, got it? Okay, perfect. Are there any questions for Mr. Thomas?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Mullis.
Mr. Thomas, we're LinkedIn friends now, I think, or we
Yes, sir.
connected earlier this week. Thank you for the presentation, and we got a chance to meet one of your long-term team members, Mr. Taylor, at the Vine City Station when I was
Yes.
touring with Councilman Byron Amos on Friday. And I don't know if you guys know, but Mr. Taylor is 84 years old and will be 85 years old next month. And he's been an employee of MARTA for 27 years, and he speaks very highly of you, Mr. Thomas, and the MARTA family. I want to commend you on keeping your team together such a long time. In the course of our tours, we toured the stations inside of Councilman Amos's district. That would be Vine City, Ashby Street, and Westlake, right? And also, I think in his district is the State Farm Arena, Georgia World Congress Center, but we didn't tour that. And we were looking at the conditions around the stations, and wanted to commend you for the interior of Ashby Street and the work that's going on in Vine City. And but we did notice that there is not a lot of flowers, a lot of erosion, erosion that causes some issues around the foundation and the bricks, making it an unsafe area, and in an area that, you know, we wanted to be pleasing. And by the way, I should tell you that I'm a real estate developer, and we build apartment buildings and townhomes, and we put a lot of money inside of our landscaping and changing our flowers out quarterly, and we just find it just makes the neighborhood a nicer, our residents feel better, and they tend not to litter because it's just pretty flowers. Can we get flowers, and maybe we get a lot of runoff because there's a lot of concrete around those stations, and bring in, you know, soil to make sure that we're keeping the foundations and the soil and the grass properly, because we just get so much rain, and we had that problem, that it would just erodes the grass and the ground around the stations. Is that going to be part of this contract?
Absolutely, sir. That's a great question, and I didn't go into a lot of details about it on one of the previous slides, but that in itself is one of the reasons that we we took a completely different approach with adding the 3 supplemental contractors, right? So whether it was a ribbon cutting ceremony like what we just had at Indian Creek not long ago, or whether it's the mayor's inauguration and we're seeking to try to do some improvements to the plaza. The whole intent of trying to add those supplemental vendors was exactly what you just said. It gives us opportunity to do some seasonal plannings and get some fresh color, make the entrance to our stations and the forefront to our properties just as inviting as some of the surrounding properties. So that's the entire goal of the approach with this solicitation.
Would it be fair to expect 6 months from now, when these contractors get going in their new contract, that we will see seasonal plannings at all of the stations?
So we'll probably have to focus on, we'll see them, but likely not at the same exact time, but because there are some other programs where we're doing landscaping upgrades as well. So so for instance, part of the station rehabilitation and some of the prioritized tasks as part of that program, specifically at like Indian Creek and HE Homes as well, is to do some of that stuff on a bigger scale than what this solicitation would do, but they would definitely work hand in hand to make sure that we kind of have as much coverage in as many different areas of the system as possible from day one, if it's up to me.
I would encourage us to kind of think through and see if we can have a seasonal planning plan for all the stations once we do the rehab, because I will tell you, nice landscape, it impacts people's behavior and impacts the community, and it makes MARTA a leader in these communities.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if we can do that, I really appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you, Mr. Mullis. Any other questions, comments of Mr. Thomas? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Please vote. The resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 3 is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of new and remanufactured engines and overhaul repairs, IFB B46989. Mr. Taylor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairperson Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operation and Safety Committee. My name is Jesse Taylor, General Superintendent of Bus Maintenance. I have 21 years of service with MARTA, and I am a first-time presenter.
We will be nice.
Thank you. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 3, B46989, a resolution for the procurement of new and remanufactured engines and overhaul repairs. Next slide, please. This lists the background of the contract. The new contract will allow for the procurement of all engine models, both new and remanufactured, with remanufactured engines being a more cost-effective option for our high-mileage buses. This new contract will also provide for the overhaul and repair of engines for the current and future bus fleets. July 1st, 2021, a notice to bidders was sent out to 10 vendors for procurement of new and remanufactured engines and overhaul repairs. A notice of the invitation for bids was advertised in the AJC, Georgia Procurement Registry, the Georgia Local Access Marketplace, and on MARTA's website. 13 firms retrieved the online solicitation or purchased and the CD. At the bid opening date and the time and date of September 21st, 2021 at approximately 2 p.m., 3 bids were received. None of the companies that submitted bids met the DBE goal of 5%. Cummins submitted the single bid for the new and remanufactured engines, and Associated Fuels submitted the lowest bid for engine overhaul repairs. Next slide, please. This slide references the engine procurements. New and remanufactured engines are used primarily for the bus midlife overhaul program. Engines include the Cummins ISLG, Cummins L9, Cummins L9N, and the Cummins ISB model engines. Cummins is the only provider of engines for the MARTA fleet and was determined to be a responsive and responsible bidder for this awardable procurement. Next slide, please. This slide references the engine repairs and overhauls. Engine overhaul and repairs will allow MARTA to use local contractor for our non-midlife overhaul engine-related work. Associated Fuel Systems Incorporated submitted the lowest bid and was determined to be a responsive and responsible bidder for this separately awardable procurement. Next slide, please. Request to approve the resolution. The anticipated term for this contract is 5 years. Cummins Power South requested amount is $26,473,242.77. Associated Fuels Systems requested amount is $320,000. The Office of Bus Maintenance respectfully requests authorization for the resolution to enter into contracts with Cummins Power South and Associated Fuel Systems in the amount of $26,793,242.77. Next slide, please. Do you have any questions of me?
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Let's go ahead and move and second it before we open it up to discussion. Do I hear a motion for approval? Mr. Frierson moves. Do I hear a second? Somebody seconded. Man, this thing moves fast. Any questions of Mr. Taylor? Chair Scott.
Where is Cummins Power South located?
It is located off of 75, south of 285.
So it's
in
here.
Yes,
here
in the
in
Forest
Atlanta.
Park area, yes.
And did I hear you correctly in saying they did not meet the 5% DBE goal?
That is correct.
They did not meet the 5%?
They did not meet the 5% goal.
So in awarding them this contract, have we requested that at some point they meet the goal?
Chair Scott, I actually asked that same question in the Operations and Safety pre-brief, and Ms. Nash helped walk me through that, and so she's here, so maybe we'll turn it over to her.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair Scott. So there are some issues with this particular contract and meeting the 5% goal. So Cummins being the only bidder on the contract, when we looked into the opportunities for DBE participation, it so happened that due to the warranty that these engines have on them, there was very limited opportunities. So we actually did work with Cummins to try to come up with something that would not void the warranty. The only thing we were able to come up with is actually transporting the engines. So transporting and getting a company that could transport or haul the engines or the buses themselves. So that ended up being approximately 1% of the DBE goal, but because Cummins did actually look for opportunities, and though they weren't able to actually come up with them, they did make good faith efforts, what the FTA considers to be good faith efforts. The opportunities just were not there.
How many employees do they have? Do you know?
It's a worldwide company. Our local facility, I do not know how many employees they have. So they do have quite a few employees.
Can we find that out?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can find that out. And one thing I would like to add is that they do have a supplier diversity program. Being a worldwide company, they do have a supplier diversity program that does, when opportunities avail itself, work with DBEs, minority business enterprise companies, and that is also something that we take into consideration when we look at good faith efforts.
So they presented you with this information,
Yes, ma'am, they did.
documented.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. Any other questions? Mr. Snyder?
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask one quick question as a follow-up to that. When you mentioned the warranty issue that was a problem for the DBE, meeting the DBE requirement, are you referring to the requirement that certain people be certified to work on Cummins engines and have certain certifications?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that's it.
And that was not, we didn't have people with DBE certifications that met that?
On our
requirement.
DBE directory, the companies that may be able to do engine work did not have that certification.
Okay. And one last thing, maybe if you know, is that a certification you have to get through Cummins, or is it just some other sort of third-party certification?
That information I do not know.
You have to get it through Cummins.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, thank you.
I have a follow-up.
Yes, ma'am. Chair Scott.
Since it's you're saying it's a certification that you have to get through Cummings?
Yes, ma'am.
So is that an accredited universal program taught through colleges and universities or technical training?
This would be their company-specific certification.
Their
Yes.
company-specific
Yes.
certification? And can we find out if that matches a college or universities or apprenticeship or training?
We could find that out, yes.
Thank you.
Collie, you want to?
Mayor Floyd shared with me that they show 58,000 employees.
Well, yes, Collie just found that out, and that's their worldwide employment. We will certainly, Mr. Taylor, get the information of the Atlanta-based. But Ms. Nash, I'll call you back up and ask you the same question I asked you in the pre-brief meeting. Very justifiably hearing some concern about the DBE not meeting the DBE goals here, but I just want you to say it the same way. You are comfortable with this bid on behalf of your office?
Yes, sir. On behalf of our office, we are comfortable with this bid. We're comfortable with the information that we have to present to the FTA regarding this bid, and we do have to present information to the FTA because it is a federally funded contract. So we are comfortable that we have followed FTA's guidelines on good faith efforts.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's call the question. Who? Okay. So the quorum has not been met on that measure. It really has been met? Oh, because it's a committee meeting? Okay. The quorum is met. Okay, that resolution passes. Thank you. Next, we'll ask Mr.
Thank you for your time.
This machine says that the quorum is not met. We may need to do something so that in the record it actually shows that it wasn't in this committee.
I'll make it.
She's keeping paper, vote tallies here, and I believe the problem is that the settings for this machine is set to a full board meeting, which the quorum would be higher. But since it's a committee meeting, the quorum has been met, and we'll make sure that the minutes accurately reflect that, because Tyrene is keeping voting tabs.
Thank you, and because we ran into this problem several years ago with the quorum not being met on an issue, and it affects the way it's presented to the board somehow. So just be careful with that.
And we'll get that changed with the system too for committee meetings. All right, thank you. New technology. All right, agenda item number 4 is a resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio antenna sites, L40123. Mr. Miller, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Doug Miller. I am the Director of Railcar Maintenance. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 4. This is a resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio antenna sites, L40123. Next slide, please. I will speak to these areas, explain why the funding is needed, and present the resolution for approval. Next slide, please. The requested resolution authorizes the general manager, CEO, or delegate to continue to pay existing radio tower lease agreements by adding additional authorized funds in the amount of $1,560,687.31. The authorization is being funded with local operating funds included in the approved FY 2022 budget. Funds for subsequent fiscal years will be included in subsequent annual budgets. Next slide, please. There are currently 4 communication towers locations that support MARTA's radio communication network. They provide critical mobile radio communications coverage and support data transmissions for the bus and mobility AVL system. And that's the automatic vehicle location system. These tower sites are located and strategically positioned at Stone Mountain, Union City, Alpharetta, and Georgia Pacific. They provide coverage of our service area and some level of redundancy in the event one tower site goes down. As part of the radio system upgrade project approved last year, 2 additional tower sites will be added, increasing the coverage area and the redundancy. Next slide, please. These tower sites are leased per existing agreements in place with options until 2027. This payment authorization was originally approved by the board in 2017. This item formalized the legacy agreements funding into a payment authorization that is managed by procurement. This action added additional fiduciary controls by eliminating the use of direct pay and provides increased fiscal oversight. This item is an increase in authorization for existing contract, so there are no DBE considerations. Next slide. I am requesting that the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio tower sites in the amount of $1,560,687.31. Chairman Worthy, I will now turn it back over to you for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. If you'll go ahead and pull up the move and second option, please. Mr. Mullis has moved. There's been a second. Any discussion or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I had this one question.
Mr. Frars.
So these towers that you mentioned here, these are existing towers, we're just going to lease off of those?
Yeah, they're already functioning. We're already leasing. This is just a payment mechanism to pay those existing leases.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pond.
Who owns these towers?
One group owns two of them. The two of them are owned by, let me see if I have that information.
They're all private.
They're all private, yeah. Yeah, two of them are owned by one company, and two other groups own one each. So it's three different contracts actually controlling the four towers.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Floyd.
Are the lease agreements, are they going up in cost? What's the reason for it's an annual fee we pay, correct?
It's a monthly, actually, but these are about 15-year-old contracts at this point, and they're 20-year series of 4 or 5 year contracts for each one. Each 5 years it renews, and they escalate, every 5 years. So originally there was no contract, there was no procurement mechanism. These were treated from a legacy standpoint kind of like the water bill or the electric bill. It was a utility that we paid, monthly on these different lease agreements. And then 5 years ago, the authority decided to reduce or eliminate direct pay as much as possible and formalize all these existing contracts into a procurement agreement. So now when we pay the lease, it's submitted, it's reviewed by procurement, and there's a series of approvals. It's more formalized. So 5 years ago, when we implemented this funding authorization, they funded it for 5 years for the next option of the contract. So this one takes the final option on these original contracts and funds the final years of these 4 tower agreements.
Okay, so we're agreeing on a monthly lease for 4 towers.
You're technically agreeing on funding the fund to pay them, yes.
Okay, and somebody else owns the towers. The equipment that's on there, MARTA owns. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we're responsible for maintaining that equipment, right?
Largely, yes.
But the tower maintenance is somebody else's responsibility, right? Making sure the tower doesn't fall over or.
Yeah, or
or
that they have power there for us to use and things like that, correct.
Okay, do we have any options other than using these 4?
Well, we're going to look at that now. These are all coming to an end, right? 5 years. So we have to make the decision, do we want to extend these and create new contracts, more options to extend these further? Or do we want to consider swapping them and putting it out for a bid and opening it up to try to go other places with them? That's a decision as an authority over the next couple of years we're going to have to make and figure out how to. Honestly, it's not an easy thing to change these around, as you can imagine. And there is a very limited number of, it's not like there's tons and tons of radio sites and you just request it and all these people have options to do it. It's kind of very limited market. So that's something we need to explore moving forward, is how we want to extend these into the future, whether we want to competitively bid them and go out, or whether we want to try to reach agreements with these existing ones and keep them in place.
And I would suspect that involves actually how we communicate. Rather than using a tower, use a satellite or whatever, and I'm just guessing.
Yeah, the technology we have now is conducive to the towers, I think, but long term, the next generation of this might be something else. I think you're right.
Okay, but we're committed for 5 years, and we are actually, the check for next month is going to be more than the checks for this month because the rate went up some.
Every 5 years it went up. There was an escalation clause, like, 5% or whatever that it goes up, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a couple questions. First of all, the radio towers that we use, I assume other companies use the towers as well. We're not the only equipment on the tower, or are we the only one?
I'm not sure, to be
Okay.
honest with you. And they're buildings that have radio towers on them, so the buildings themselves have other uses than just the radio tower.
Different question is, how much does it cost to build a radio tower? I mean, we're leasing the use of a tower.
Right.
But how much does it actually cost to construct one?
I don't know the answer to that off the top. I imagine fairly expensive, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just curious, I'd like to know that at some point, just to compare apples to apples. I mean, I don't know if it makes any sense at all, but I would just like to know what the cost is.
Sure, we can look into that.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Mr. Millis?
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for the presentation. I noticed that there's a tower at Georgia Pacific. I would assume that's on the top of the building. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's because of the height that allows the signals to move around and hit the vehicles. Is that?
Yes.
Because I was just wondering, do we have any other assets or facilities that might be able to replace the Georgia Pacific tower?
Yeah. I think that's what we're going to be exploring over the last 5 years of this contract, to have a decision made on which route we'll go when this ends, whether it makes more long-term economic sense to look at competitively bidding this, creating them, or you brought up an option, bring it in-house somehow, maybe on one of our buildings or something like that. That's the type thing moving forward we'll have to explore. I mean, these lease agreements have been in place for 15 years and have another 5. So as part of evolving over the next 5 years, we're going to have to figure that out.
And I would just make a suggestion. The rent payments on these are really nice. And if we have facilities that could facilitate other users of our airspace, our air rights, we should really explore that to bring in more revenue to the agency.
Understood.
Thank you. Any other questions,
Yes.
comments?
Tom.
Mr. Pond?
Just for information, and I'm pretty familiar with this process. First of all, these radio towers are not cell phone towers, so it's very different from analyzing where they go, how high they need to be, so there are much fewer of those. And the second piece is typically these towers are developed by developers like yourself, but they're developing towers and they'll have 2, 3, 4 users on the same tower. So his options are limited. There are not lots of these towers around. That's just a passing comment. So.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll call the question. Please vote. Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is a briefing on bus operation KPIs with Mr. Humphrey, Ms. Shepherd, Mr. Chafin, Mr. Turpin.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Harold Humphrey. I'm the Deputy Chief of Bus Operations for MARTA. Been here 6 months. I am a first-time presenter to the board and really excited to be here. So take it easy on me. I got some more too as well. So I will do this with a team of experts here locally. I will have Tracy Cogdell, who is recently promoted to Acting General Superintendent of BCC. which is within the last 2 weeks, actually. Really excited about that. And today I would be amiss if I did not say it's her actual work anniversary for 8 years at MARTA. So excited about that. We also have Charles Britt Chafin, who recently joined us as well. He has a lot of experience, 24 years in maintenance. And his job before he came here was actually a region director for a private company called TransDev, but he has local experience with GRTA before it became the ATL in maintaining their vehicles, and also Gwinnett County Transit. So he's local, and we're glad to have him. And then, of course, Miles Turpin, who is our Director of Mobility, probably the best Director of Mobility in the entire country, as I like to say it. He's really good. So we'll start there, give you a nice briefing on our KPIs. And first up is Ms. Cogdell.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Cogdell. I am the recently promoted General Superintendent of Bus Communications. Today marks my 8th year anniversary with the authority. This is my first time presenting, as Mr. Harrell said, and I truly consider it an honor to stand before you all on this morning. I ask that you would please direct your attention to agenda item number 5. Next slide, please. This morning, I will be providing the committee with a briefing of the KPIs for bus operations. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Bus on-time performance. Bus on-time performance, our goal has been slated at 78.5%. We have met this goal because we are currently averaging 80.99% for our on-time performance goal. We were able to successfully achieve this goal by providing our operators with consistent counseling and coaching, and by enlisting the help of Bus Communications to help us in monitoring our bus operators' performance. Next slide, please. Bus customer complaints. Our bus customer complaint goal has been set at 8 complaints per 100,000 customers boarding. Once again, we have met this goal. We are currently at 7.4% complaints per 100,000 customers boarding. We have been able to achieve this goal by providing our operators with additional customer service training and by deploying our road supervisors to become highly visible at our most often utilized rail stations to provide an extra level of customer service support. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Bus collisions. Our bus collision goal is at 3.80 collisions per 100,000 miles driven. I am happy to report that once again, we have met our goal. We are currently averaging 3.67 collisions per 100,000 miles that are driven. We were able to accomplish this goal by enhancing our monthly safety committee meetings with our operators and by soliciting, once again, the help of Bus Communications with sending periodic safety messages to our operators through their bus radios. Next slide, please. At this time, I would like to bring up the new maintenance director, Mr. Chafin. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning. My name is Britt Chafin, and I'm the new maintenance director for bus maintenance. I was pleased to join the team in the last 30 days, and this will be my first time presenting. Next slide, please. In the month of November, the mean distance between failures is an average of 5,612 miles. This is below our target area of 7,500 miles, but this number does represent a true rate based on the NTD standards and definitions after internal mitigation was completed analyzing last year's numbers. Last year's numbers represented service interruption, delay times, past interpretation issues, and unclear understanding of the standards. NTD reporting for FTA has been reported accurately since 2017, and this reporting error
only affected the internal tools and customer reportings. The current numbers provide complete transparency to allow a base to build upon. Even though the miles are below target, the maintenance team has worked diligently to determine solutions that provide improvement and sustainability, which will correlate to meeting or exceeding the goal in Q2 of this year. Next slide, please. With a true depiction of the failure rate, the maintenance team has begun swift actions to focus on the fundamentals of maintenance and increasing the reliability of the fleet. Extensive trend analysis is being completed daily, weekly, monthly, both as a system-wide effort and as an individual garage approach. Using the trends, maintenance has identified training efforts to reinvest in our team and ensure proper diagnosis of our fleet. The maintenance team has done extensive research on the emission systems pertaining to our clean burning diesel fleet. The research is yielding promising proactive steps to maintain the fleet, and engineering is currently analyzing the data to ensure the replacement schedule is best suited for sustainability. Most importantly, maintenance is concentrating on the fundamentals of our trade with increased quality inspections, focus on our preventative maintenance inspections. This will allow a standardized approach to our PMI process while being a tool for development of our technicians on the quality that is expected. Next slide, please. I now introduce Mr. Turpin, who will present the mobility key performance indicators.
Good morning. Good morning. There we go. Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. Good to see you again as well this new year. Hope everybody's doing well. I'll be presenting a mobility briefing for you and kind of give you a quick summary of what we've been doing mobility-wise. Next slide. Here is our operations KPIs. These are the metrics that I'll be going over that drives the engines for mobility. And give you some particular information on one with our MDBFs. Next slide. As you remember when I last presented to you, mobility had some challenges with our transition as far as keeping our on-time performance. I'm happy to report that we are at 92.72%, which exceeds expectations, and we've been in that area now for the last several months, and I do not anticipate any abnormalities in that area. Next slide. Mobility collisions per 1,000 miles. These are our collision rates for which we're looking at with our contractors. And we noticed this trend in the wrong direction in October. And moving forward now, I have asked our contractors to put some enhancements in place, key to driving that number back into a meets grade or an exceeds expectation area. And two of those areas were what we found were training and a recruitment challenge that our contractors are currently going through. Next slide. Here, this is our means distance between failures. Again, I would note that if you look at that November time frame in a prior year, and you'll see the number of 144, 126, as opposed to where we are in November of 42 at 269. The previous contractor had vehicles of 1 year or less utilization for this metric, and also their technology that they were using as far as reporting incidents and our reporting incident structure, they had some miscues, quite frankly. And they were also tied to the O&M operation. As the board knows now, we have centralized dispatching, and centralized dispatching is not tied to the operation. And therefore, you see the discrepancy there where we had a true number of 42,269. And more importantly, we have some back office measures that make sure that we can verify our MBDFs. Next slide. Here's our mobility reservations call wait time. Again, we are exceeds expectations here. We continue to do so. It upticked a little just because of the COVID situation that we're all going through. And we also lost a team member during that time frame. Next slide. Mobility reservations calls and abandonment rate. Again, very proud of that number. We don't see any challenges in that as we're at 2.34%. and continuing on a great trend. Next slide. Mobility complaints per 1,000 boardings. Again, we're exceeding expectations in that area and I expect that trend to continue. Next slide. And thank you, and I will hand it back over to my Deputy Chief, Mr. Harold Humphrey.
Thanks, Miles.
And that concludes the presentation, but I need to say that this is our report card. This is what we do every day, and it's very important for our team to deliver. And this team actually, every day, we have 7:30 calls to review all the operations KPIs for all the departments. And of course, back at 11:30, we have another daily call with the providers on the mobility side. So I just want to share that. And now we're here for any questions. Back to you, Chairman Worthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Humphrey. Any questions from the board members? We have some first-time presenters here, so I mean, you know, now's the time to really.
Four.
Well, I think it suffice it to say, if there's no questions, great job presenting, and thank you for the good work. There's a lot of great stuff on there, and the things that still need improvement are obviously traveling in the right direction. So congratulations, and thank you for the information. Before we adjourn, Mr. McKinney, I know you have an announcement to make.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Worthy. This is in response to and in relation to a briefing we had in November by Rhonda Allen and her group. Our MARTA Reach Demands Response Pilot is scheduled to launch on March 1st. During that briefing, Rhonda communicated that we would establish a launch date first quarter, so that's meeting that goal. No presentation will be presented today, but we'll provide a briefing in February at the Ops and Safety Committee. So good news. Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. McKinney. With no other business to come before the Operations Safety Committee, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Order. Okay. Okay, before I take the vote on the meeting minutes, I do want to say it's always been an honor to work for MARTA, and it's been a privilege also to work with Jeff Parker, and his spirit would be missed. His body may not be here, but his spirit is, and we're grateful for his presence, and we're going to go about doing the business that he would want us to do to keep this enterprise healthy and successful. All right, amen. So you have before you the business management meeting from November 18th? Okay. All right, we're still waiting on a couple of other members to come back before we can go ahead and finish the vote. All right. Give us a moment. I think we're going to need their presence, right, in order to get the quorum. 5 members. Okay. You okay, so we just need to wait for the attendants to come up so we can. Okay. Okay, so the roll has been calculated, and so we have 5 members here to start the business. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2021 Business Management Committee meeting. Can I get a motion in a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Bill Floyd. I need a second. Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Snyder, all right? All those in favor, please vote. All right, the amendments have been approved. Thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the committee, the commitment of local funding related to certain Atlanta Regional Commission TIP projects grant applications. The presenter will be Michael Bradley, Grant Program Analysis. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board, Mr. Greenwood, and members of MARTA's leadership executive team. The purpose of the board committee brief is to respectfully request board adoption of the resolution authorizing the commitment of local funds for ARC TIP project applications. Next slide. The Atlanta Regional Commission, or ARC, held a Transportation Improvement Program TIP call for projects, or what they call a solicitation. And the solicitation is to fund projects in the TIP for federal fiscal years 2023 through 2025. The fund pot for the solicitation is traditional FHWA fund source programs. You have Surface Transportation, Block Grant Program, Transportation Alternatives, and then Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, which is commonly referred to as CMAQ. So if awarded, if awarded to MARTA, funding would be flexed from FHWA and it would be moved over to FTA, where it would be managed under a traditional grant type program, the 5307 Urbanized Area Program. The solicitation closed December 2nd, 2021. ARC is currently evaluating the submitted applications and reaching out to applicants for follow-up information or any questions they may have as they go through the review process. The initial award recommendations will be late spring, with final awards coming in summer of 2022. Next slide. So for this solicitation, MARTA submitted 3 project applications. You can see the 3 projects in the table here. This funding would help support the replacement of up to 15 CNG buses that have fully met their useful life as defined by the FTA. The second one is the MARTA Bus Corridor Improvements Projects. This funding request is looking to enhance bus stop waiting conditions, access and safety, operational efficiency by identifying improvements along 3 corridors. And the 3 corridors that planning identified for this initial request is the Roosevelt Highway, Covington Highway, and Georgia 85. The third project you see there is the Stonecrest Transit Hub. That project that funding request would help fund the implementation and construction of the hub that is currently in the planning phase right now. So the total federal request of the 3 projects that were submitted comes to $22.8 million, which would require a 20% non-federal local match of $5.7 million. However, the actual required match amount is really dependent on projects being selected and then also on the award amount of those projects. It is common sometimes that we will get a reduced award based on funding availability, regional need, etc.
I do want to note that all 3 of the projects that were submitted are in the authority's approved 10-year capital program already. And really the resolution purpose is it's an ARC requirement that they get confirmation for any agency that has, a board of directors to get their confirmation that if projects are selected for federal funding, that the non-federal local match will be provided for those projects. Next slide. And then with this slide, I just wanted to really give just a little bit of background of the past 3 ARC tip solicitations that MARTA did participate in. For the 2015 solicitation, there were 7 applications submitted, 5 of which were awarded. The total federal award came to $12.7 million with a required local match of $3.1. 2017, MARTA submitted 6 applications, 3 of which were awarded. The total federal award for that one was $32.9 million with a local match of 8.2. 2019, 5 applications were submitted and awarded, and 4 of those were awarded. The total federal award for that was $20.9 with a required local match of 5.2. So really the purpose of the slide is just so we can get maybe a trend of looking at, based on what we did submit this go around, that the range that we possibly would be looking at for the non-federal local match would be between $3 to $5 million, just based off previous solicitations. Next slide. And with that brief, I respectfully request board approval of the resolution authorizing the commitment of the local funds for ARC tip projects.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Can I get a motion to approve for discussion in a second? Okay, it's been moved. Can I get a second? Okay, it's been seconded. Any discussions by the board members concerning the resolution? Bill, Mr. Floyd.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is approval from the federal government or from ARC board?
It goes through the ARC board or through their regional process where they evaluate, say, the applications, I believe with regional stakeholders. I could double check, but it goes first through ARC, then it goes through the ARC board. It isn't approved by the federal government until we get, say, that award, and then we go to do our grant application with the FTA, and that's when it becomes a grant agreement with the federal government.
Okay, the money at ARC now technically there, and they just have to approve us getting it? Is that, they've got 50 applications for this amount of money, and they're deciding who
That's
gets,
correct.
is that correct?
Yes, that's the regional policy for this program.
That organizes it in my head a little bit.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
got it. You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Any discussions? All right, so I'll call the question. Please vote on the resolution that you have. All right, the resolution has passed. Thank you, Mr. Bradley. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad to see some of these projects happening, moving forward, particularly in DeKalb County, so it's a great opportunity. All right, the next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of investment advisory services, RFP P50072. Mr. Kevin Hurley, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Frierson, members of the Business Management Committee, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Stranoth. I'm here to present the resolution for permission to solicit for investment advisory services through a request for proposal P50072. Next slide, please. The agenda for the presentation includes a little bit of background into the contract, the use of the RFP process, really the rationale behind using the RFP process, and Business Management Committee meeting action. Next slide. This contract supports the pension committee that provides oversight for the non-represented employee 401A defined contribution plan and the MARTA employee 457 deferred compensation plan. The investment advisor assists in monitoring performance, fee structures, investment policy changes, potential plan fund changes, and solicitation of plan record-keeping services. This solicitation will replace the current contract, which expires November 30th of 2022, and the proposed contract will be for 3 years with 2 one-year options and will cost approximately $420,000 over the 5-year life of the contract. The costs of the contract will be borne by the underlying plans that it's there to support. It won't come directly from MARTA. Next slide, please. MARTA staff, we're authorized to utilize an RFP process if it's impracticable to prepare adequate specifications to solicit via a competitive bid. It's been determined that this contract for professional services is impracticable to solicit through competitive bid. Approval of this resolution only permits staff to conduct the solicitation process, with the final approval of the proposed vendor being brought back to the board for approval of the vendor at a subsequent board meeting. Next slide, please. At this time, I respectfully request the BMC approval of the resolution to permit staff to execute the solicitation of proposals for investment advisory services through a competitive RFP P50072.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second? All right, it's been moved and it's been seconded. All right, discussion by the board members. Any questions for Mr. Hurley?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. I do know you said it would not require MARTA funds.
Yes, ma'am. MARTA would not directly be paying for the contract. MARTA does make contributions to the defined contribution pension plan.
Okay.
And there could be MARTA funds that have been left as people have departed MARTA and weren't fully vested. Those funds could be used to support the contract, but MARTA will not pay for it directly.
Thank you. That was my.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted clarification. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the board members? Yes.
Has there been a DBE goal set for this RFP?
There has not been yet. Paula Nash will work with the selection team or someone from her team to set that goal.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
What was the rate of participation by DBEs in the previous contract that's scheduled to expire November the 30th, 2022?
There was no DBE leveled against the contract in prior contracts.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Hearing none, I call the question for the resolution. All right, the resolution has passed. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a briefing from the DNI. This is the EEO, Paula Nash, Executive Director of Diversity and Director of Diversity and Inclusion. You have the floor. Thank you, Ms. Nash.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Frierson, Madam Chair Scott, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Srinath, and members of the Business Management Committee. I'm Paula Nash. I'm the Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion. This briefing has nothing to do with DBE. So today, this briefing will be on MARTA's Equal Employment Opportunity Plan, or our EEO plan. Next slide, please. So as a recipient of federal funds from the FTA, every 4 years, MARTA is required to provide an updated EEO plan to the FTA. And this EEO plan in general provides information on MARTA's employment policies and practices, which include our recruiting and hiring process. And it also does discuss our EEO complaint process. However, the most prominent focus of MARTA's of this EEO plan is MARTA's workforce demographics and whether we have demographic groups that are underutilized. In essence, we have to show that we are an equal opportunity employer. And not by just saying it, though we do have to say it, we have to have it on our website, we have it on our applications, but we have to show that we are making that attempt or that effort to make sure that we are focusing on employing traditionally marginalized groups. So this plan covers May 1st, 2022 through April 30th of 2026. But the relevant look-back data that you will see in this presentation will be the last 4 fiscal years. Next slide, please. So kind of jumping right into the meat and potatoes of the EEO plan, which are the workforce demographics, the FTA has 3 main areas that it focuses on, and we will cover in this presentation. So we will show an overview of MARTA's current workforce as it relates to race and gender. We will be determining if there has been any significant demographic shifts since the last plan. So we'll look from 2017 to 2021 to see if there has been demographic shifts. And then we'll identify whether there are groups employed at a level below the availability of qualified persons in the relevant labor market. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of MARTA's workforce demographics. So in 2021, authority-wide, MARTA had 4,193 employees. Now these are actual employees, not just funded positions. So these are bodies in the seat. And if you're looking and counting up the numbers, females is actually counted twice because females are included in the actual race and ethnic portion as well. So this slide shows a breakdown of gender as well as race or ethnicity. And the snapshot for this date is June 30th, 2021. So when we look at EEOC or EEO data and we have to show actual numbers, we pick a snapshot date. And the date that we always choose is the last date of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. The orange represents the MARTA workforce, and the blue represents the Atlanta Metropolitan Statistical Area. And we get that data from census data. We use that particular report, which is done by the American Community Survey Report, because it includes the actual employment codes, the federal employment codes that we have to use for our analysis, which we will see later on. But I want to point out that the Atlanta MSA is actually a 29-county area. So it is a pretty large area that we're using as an analysis. Next slide, please. So next we'll look at whether or not there has been significant change in the demographics from 2017 to 2021. And we analyzed that looking at race and ethnicity alone, gender alone, then we looked at job codes, and then we looked at race and job codes combinations, which you will see in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So this is looking at race or ethnicity alone. And as you can see, there's been a slight change, with the biggest being a 2% decrease in white employees between 2017 and 2021. Next slide, please. This slide shows gender. And again, small change, but we consider this to be a notable change because there's been a 3% increase in female employees. And any increase in a traditionally marginalized group does mean a lot to us. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the raw number difference between 2017 and 2021 based on job codes. Now, these job codes are federal job codes. They're actually created by the EEOC, and it's meant to cover government and government-related employers. It can be a little tricky in determining which MARTA positions go into which job codes, so I want to give some examples here. Officials and administrators are our directors and EMT group. The professionals are our analysis, are our analysts, our project managers, our operations superintendents and supervisors, and our police lieutenants and majors. Technicians reflects our service planners, our bus stop planners, our claims adjusters, and our police sergeants. Protective service are all our sworn police officers that don't have rank, also our police dispatchers and call takers. The administrative support are our office administrators and our customer care representatives, as well as our traffic checkers. And then the skilled craft workers are our journeymen or our mechanics. So, and then that leaves the service and maintenance group. That's our bus and rail operators, our service persons, whether they're service persons 1s or 7s, and our station agents. So almost half of MARTA's employees fall within that last category, our service and maintenance groups. Now, there are small segments of MARTA's employees that I did not name here, but they would fit somewhere within that structure. So the key takeaway from this slide is that our skilled craft workers increased by 30% within the last 4 fiscal years. And remember, that's our journeymen or our mechanics. But the other key thing is that our service and maintenance workers decreased by 9.2%. And actually, since this snapshot was June 30th, that increase has probably grown since then. And the reason that that's a key thing is that, again, that is where over half of our employees work. Next slide, please. So looking at the job code and race combination, you will see a little decrease occurred in minority employees for the official and administrators job code, but an increase in minority employees in all the other job codes. And it's quite the opposite for our non-minorities. There was a small increase in the officials and administrators job code, but a decrease in non-minorities in all the other areas. Next slide, please. So in answering the question of whether or not there has been a significant shift in MARTA's demographics over the last 4 years, our answer to that is no. Now, I want to point out that we realize and that there has definitely been increases and decreases within the representation of the groups in the last 4 years. And some of those increases and decreases do bear close observation as we move forward. But when we look for significant shifts, we're looking for whether a dominant group in numbers has shifted to a non-dominant group or vice versa. So the answer to that is no. Next slide, please. And so this is the last question that we answer. Are any groups employed at a level below the availability of qualified persons in the relevant labor market? And the answer to that is yes. Next slide, please. So to get that answer, we compared the relevant labor market to MARTA's workforce based on the job codes that we saw earlier. And remember, the job codes are the 29 county Atlanta MSA, which arguably may be large for MARTA's labor market. But we have to use that particular report because it does have the job codes in it. Next slide, please. So here is looking at the Atlanta MSA for available workers versus our workforce. Everything that you see in orange represents underutilization. So given our area, which is public transit, underutilization has been traditional in the areas that you see when compared to the overall market, because we are comparing it to the overall market, which isn't just public transit. Our goal in 2017 was to make strides to actually decrease some of this underutilization. And we did make some small strides. For example, percentages of females has increased across the board since 2017. Similarly, there's been an increase in Hispanic employees across the board since 2017. However, we have not kept up with the increase that has occurred with the overall MARTA relevant workforce. So what we are looking at in the future is to continue to try to make some strides in lowering the underutilization in these particular areas that you see here. One thing I also wanted to point out is that you see that the whole category for white employees is underutilized, and that's been an issue that has continued with MARTA for quite a while. So that's an area that we continue to work at as well. So the logical question may be, what does MARTA's applicant pool look like? And I can tell you that it looks largely like what our workforce reflects. So our applicant pool happens to mirror pretty much what our workforce mirrors. Next slide, please. So opportunities for improvement. So literally all of the areas that were in orange are definitely opportunities for improvement. But we especially want to focus on increasing Hispanic employees in our skilled craft positions and our service maintenance positions compared to availability, because that was a very wide difference. We have less than expected representation in hiring of Asian employees in our professional categories, as well as our service maintenance positions compared to availability. So those are some of the areas that we really want to focus on. And then, of course, with our white employees, our administrative support, our protective service, and our skilled craft positions, as well as service and maintenance, are some of the highest levels of underutilized areas. So we want to focus on those areas. Next slide, please. So our plans for actually achieving progress, we want to continue focusing on recruitment and outreach to underrepresented groups through social media, through engaging with diverse organizations. And we also want to monitor our employment practices regularly to see what strides we have made, and then bring the results to management going forward. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Paul. Do we have any questions from the board members? This is just a briefing, maybe some questions or comments. Well, I do have a couple. In the observation of looking at this, I'm glad that you were able to explain to me that this is a comparison between what the census says that we have in our community of Atlanta or metropolitan Atlanta and what we actually have in our workforce. All right?
Correct,
Is that
yes.
correct? And
that
so
is
that
correct.
really does help me understand. And I think, once again, you mentioned that there are opportunities for us to draw in Hispanic and Asian communities to apply for positions throughout this enterprise so that they can have these opportunities.
Correct, yes. That is definitely one of the focus areas that we will want to really hone in on.
Okay, well, great. And I really would like to, and when you have those opportunities, I like to be invited at some of those events. I know when the first year I was on the board, I went to a few of the Hispanic community events that they had, and I do want to still be able to do that and have conversation with them, let them know we are very supportive of them working with this enterprise. You know, the diverse staff is very healthy, and MARTA really does want to champion that. So.
Yes, sir. So you definitely will get that out to the board, those events.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. I was making an observation about the MARTA workforce by EEO job code, and I noticed that our police force has dropped by about 25%. Is there any particular reason that you've discovered for that, and kind of what are we doing to address that issue?
There isn't any particular reason. Chief is here, so he may be able to explain that a little better. And remember, these are actually bodies in the seat, so it may not be positions that have dropped.
Okay.
Good morning, Chief Creer. I think, as you know, since really about George Floyd, we've really had a tremendously hard time recruiting and hiring qualified candidates in general. Since 2019, we're down probably a little over 100 FTE positions than we had in 2019, just in staffing. So the applications that are coming in are fewer and fewer, and because of the stringent requirements that we do have here, that I will continue to have, it's very difficult to get a qualified applicant in the door to begin with. So thankful to Mr. Greenwood and the rest of the staff on the C team. We've just implemented some new hiring incentive pay for new applicants, and then also a few retention efforts that we put in place for our current employees. So we're really hoping to stem the attrition this year. We were -3 last year, hiring versus left the department. So this year we're going to work real hard at our open positions. But the traditional table recruiting events that you saw around the country for years has kind of gone away. Things have moved online because of COVID and other issues. So we're really targeting the colleges and universities, the military bases, things like that, where we can go ahead and get quality candidates. We're also working on a co-op program with Georgia State University in the AU Center and local colleges around the region to go ahead and start a paid internship program with our college kids in the region early in their careers, junior year in college, to allow them to work here part-time in an internship program and hire them when they complete their college degree. So we're hoping that will help also.
Right. Thank you for that, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions? Yes.
Can I
Ron,
make
Mullis,
a suggestion to the chief also?
Yes.
I will take all the suggestions.
All right.
Savannah State University down in the coast has a criminal justice program.
Sure.
And it might be an area you may want to focus and do some recruiting. Probably not as competitive from a salary standpoint. And hopefully you can keep them when you get them up here.
Absolutely. We'll take a look. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Nash. Appreciate it very much. Great information to have. We get this information, I guess, once every 4 years. Yes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. So the other items on the agenda are just for information only. Raj, did you want to share anything concerning the financial reports that we have and highlights?
We, as you know, Mr. Frierson, we include the financial information every month for the BMC committee. The practice has been to make a presentation every quarter, which means I will be making a presentation next month. That said, if any of the committee members have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. All right, hearing none, once again, that's for information purposes, and also there's another item that's other matters that utilize the State of Georgia Technological Authority contract for procure. That's another item that's attached to the agenda. Please review those. All right, are there any other questions we need to, concerns we need to bring before this board? Okay, hearing none, I consider the meeting adjourned. All right, thank you.